Sarah Martinez had always been the kind of person who put others before herself. At 28, she worked as a nurse at the military hospital in San Diego, where she met countless brave men and women who served their country. But none of them touched her heart the way Marine Sergeant David Thompson did. David came to the hospital on a quiet Tuesday morning, carried in on a stretcher with severe injuries from an explosion in Afghanistan. His right leg was badly damaged, and doctors weren't sure if they could save it. Sarah was assigned to his care, and from the moment she saw his determined eyes fighting through the pain, she knew this patient was different. "Good morning, Sergeant," she said softly, checking his bandages. "I'm Sarah, and I'll be taking care of you." David managed a weak smile. "Lucky me," he whispered, his voice hoarse from pain medication. Over the next few weeks, Sarah spent every moment she could with David. She helped him through the painful physical therapy sessions, sat with him during the long nights when the pain kept him awake, and listened to his stories about his fellow Marines still fighting overseas. David told her about his best friend, Marcus, who had been injured in the same explosion but was in a different hospital across the country. "Marcus saved my life that day," David said one evening as Sarah adjusted his pillows. "He pushed me out of the way when he saw the bomb. Took the worst of it himself." Sarah could see the guilt in David's eyes. He felt responsible for his friend's condition, even though it wasn't his fault. She made a mental note to help him contact Marcus once he was feeling better. As days turned into weeks, something beautiful began to bloom between Sarah and David. Their conversations grew longer, their shared moments more meaningful. Sarah found herself looking forward to her shifts just to see him, and David's face would light up whenever she walked into his room. "You know," David said one day as Sarah was changing his bandages, "I've been in a lot of tough spots, but I've never met anyone like you. You make all this bearable." Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "You're pretty special yourself, Marine." Their relationship grew stronger with each passing day. Sarah would bring David books to read, and they would discuss everything from his childhood in Texas to her dreams of traveling the world. David shared stories about his military service, the brotherhood he felt with his fellow Marines, and his plans for after his recovery. But their happiness was suddenly shattered when devastating news arrived. Marcus, David's best friend, had taken a turn for the worse. The infection from his wounds had spread, and he was fighting for his life in a hospital in Virginia. David was heartbroken and desperate to see his friend, but he was still too weak to travel. "I have to get to him," David told Sarah, tears streaming down his face. "He saved my life. I can't let him die alone." Sarah's heart broke seeing the man she had fallen in love with in such pain. She knew that David's recovery was still fragile, and traveling across the country could set him back significantly. But she also understood the bond between Marines, the unbreakable brotherhood that meant everything to David. That night, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She couldn't let David suffer knowing his best friend might die without seeing him one last time. She began researching medical transport options, calling hospitals, and using her connections in the medical field to arrange something that seemed impossible. Working through the night and into the next day, Sarah managed to coordinate with doctors at both hospitals. She arranged for a medical transport plane and convinced the doctors that David was stable enough for the journey if he had proper medical supervision during the flight. "I'm going with you," she told David when she explained the plan. "You'll need medical care during the flight, and I'm not letting you do this alone." David was overwhelmed with gratitude and love for this incredible woman who was willing to risk everything to help him reach his dying friend. "Sarah, you could lose your job for this. The hospital won't approve this kind of transport." "Some things are more important than jobs," Sarah replied firmly. "Your friend needs you, and you need to be there for him." The journey to Virginia was difficult. David's condition worsened during the flight due to the stress and movement, but Sarah monitored him carefully, adjusting his medication and keeping him stable. She barely slept, focused entirely on making sure David would make it to see Marcus. When they finally arrived at the hospital in Virginia, David was weak but determined. Sarah helped him into a wheelchair, and they rushed to Marcus's room. The sight that greeted them was heartbreaking. Marcus was unconscious, surrounded by machines keeping him alive. David took his friend's hand and began to speak, telling Marcus about his recovery, about Sarah, about all the plans they had made for when they both got better. Sarah stood quietly in the corner, watching this beautiful display of friendship and loyalty. Hours passed as David sat by Marcus's bedside. Sarah monitored both patients, keeping David's pain under control while praying that Marcus would wake up to see his best friend one more time. As the sun began to set, something miraculous happened. Marcus's eyes fluttered open, and he saw David sitting beside him. The two friends smiled at each other, and Marcus whispered, "You made it, brother." They talked for hours, sharing memories and making peace with the situation. Marcus thanked David for coming, and David thanked Marcus for saving his life. Sarah watched from nearby, tears in her eyes as she witnessed this powerful bond between two heroes. But as the night progressed, Sarah began to feel strange. The exhaustion from the past few days, the stress of the journey, and the emotional weight of the situation had taken their toll on her body. She had been so focused on taking care of David and making sure he reached Marcus that she had ignored her own needs. She excused herself to get some fresh air, but as she walked down the hospital corridor, her vision became blurry. Her heart began racing, and she felt dizzy. Sarah realized something was seriously wrong, but her only thought was getting back to David. She collapsed just outside Marcus's room, her body finally giving in to the stress and exhaustion. David heard the commotion and saw the woman he loved unconscious on the floor. Hospital staff rushed to help, but Sarah didn't respond to their efforts to wake her. The doctors quickly determined that Sarah had suffered a severe stress-induced cardiac episode. Her body had been pushed beyond its limits, and she had literally given everything she had to make sure David could be with his dying friend. As Sarah was rushed to the intensive care unit, David felt a crushing weight of guilt and fear. The woman who had sacrificed everything for him was now fighting for her own life, and there was nothing he could do to help her. David sat in his wheelchair outside the intensive care unit, his hands shaking as he waited for news about Sarah. The doctors had been working on her for over an hour, and no one could tell him if she would be okay. Marcus, despite his own critical condition, had insisted on being moved closer to the ICU so he could be there for his friend. "This is all my fault," David whispered, his voice breaking. "If I hadn't been so desperate to see you, Marcus, she never would have pushed herself like this." Marcus, though weak, reached out and grabbed David's hand. "Don't you dare blame yourself for this, brother. That woman did what she did because she loves you. She saw how much you needed to be here, and she made her choice." The waiting felt endless. David watched as doctors and nurses rushed in and out of Sarah's room, their faces serious and focused. He had never felt so helpless in his life. Here was the woman who had saved him in every way possible, and he couldn't do anything to save her in return. Dr. Williams, the cardiac specialist treating Sarah, finally emerged from her room. His expression was grave as he approached David and Marcus. "Gentlemen, I need to be honest with you about Sarah's condition," Dr. Williams began. "She's suffered what we call stress cardiomyopathy, also known as broken heart syndrome. Her heart muscle has been severely weakened by extreme emotional and physical stress. We've managed to stabilize her for now, but she's in a coma." David felt the world spinning around him. "Will she wake up? Will she be okay?" "It's too early to say," the doctor replied gently. "Her body needs time to heal. The next few days will be critical. We're doing everything we can, but now it's a matter of waiting and hoping." That night, David refused to leave Sarah's side. The hospital staff, understanding the situation, allowed him to stay in her room. He held her hand and talked to her, telling her about Marcus's improvement, about how grateful he was for everything she had done, and about how much he loved her. "You have to wake up, Sarah," he whispered. "I need you. I need to tell you how sorry I am, and how much you mean to me. Please don't leave me." The next morning brought both hope and sorrow. Marcus had taken a turn for the better, his infection finally responding to treatment. But Sarah remained unconscious, her body still fighting to recover from the trauma it had endured. David's Marine unit, stationed nearby, learned about what had happened. One by one, his fellow Marines began visiting the hospital to check on him and to pay their respects to Sarah. They were amazed by the story of this nurse who had risked everything to help one of their brothers reach his dying friend. Sergeant Major Rodriguez, David's commanding officer, arrived on the second day of Sarah's coma. He was a tough man who had seen many battles, but even he was moved by what Sarah had done. "Thompson," he said, pulling up a chair next to David, "I've heard about what this woman did for you. That kind of sacrifice, that kind of love, it's rare. She's got the heart of a Marine." Word of Sarah's story began to spread throughout the Marine Corps network. Marines who had never met her started calling the hospital to ask about her condition. Her selfless act of love had touched something deep in the hearts of these warriors who understood sacrifice and brotherhood better than anyone. David's parents flew in from Texas, and Sarah's family came from California. The hospital waiting room became filled with people who had been touched by this incredible love story. Sarah's fellow nurses from San Diego also made the trip, bringing flowers and cards from their entire hospital. "Your daughter is the most caring person I've ever worked with," one of Sarah's colleagues told her parents. "She always puts others first, but this was beyond anything we could have imagined." For 5 days, Sarah remained in the coma while David never left her side. He talked to her constantly, reading her favorite books, playing music she loved, and sharing memories of their time together. The doctors encouraged him to keep talking, saying that familiar voices could sometimes help coma patients find their way back. Marcus, now strong enough to use a wheelchair, joined David in Sarah's room. The two Marines would sit with her for hours, Marcus telling stories about David's bravery in Afghanistan, and David sharing stories about how Sarah had healed not just his body, but his heart. "She's fighting in there," Marcus would say. "Just like we fought over there. She's not giving up." On the 4th night, something strange happened. David had fallen asleep in his chair next to Sarah's bed when he was awakened by a warm sensation. Sarah's hand, which he had been holding, seemed to squeeze his fingers ever so slightly. "Sarah," he whispered, but there was no other response. The monitors showed no change in her condition, but David was convinced that she was trying to communicate with him. He called for the doctors, who examined Sarah but found no significant changes. However, Dr. Williams admitted that small responses like this could be a positive sign. "Keep talking to her," he advised. "If she's starting to respond to stimuli, your voice might be what helps bring her back." The next day brought an unexpected visitor. General Patricia Hayes, the commanding officer of the Marine base, had heard about Sarah's story and wanted to meet the woman who had shown such dedication to one of her Marines. When she saw Sarah lying unconscious in the hospital bed, surrounded by flowers and cards from Marines across the country, the general was visibly moved. "This woman embodies the values we hold dear in the Corps," she told David. "Semper Fi isn't just a motto for us Marines. She lived it when she helped you reach your brother." The general made a decision that would change everything. She put out a call to Marines stationed around the world, sharing Sarah's story and asking for prayers for her recovery. The response was overwhelming. Marines from every continent sent messages of support, and many began planning to visit if Sarah woke up. By the sixth day, Sarah's condition began to show slight improvements. Her brain activity increased, and the doctors were cautiously optimistic. David maintained his vigil, now joined by Marcus, who had been cleared to spend longer periods outside his own room. "Tomorrow," David told Sarah that night, "tomorrow will mark a week since you collapsed. The doctors say your body is getting stronger. Your heart is healing, just like you helped heal mine." What David didn't know was that his words were reaching Sarah in the darkness of her unconscious state. Deep in her mind, she was fighting to return to him, struggling against the exhaustion and trauma that held her back. In her dreams, she could hear David's voice calling to her, could feel the warmth of his hand holding hers. She wanted desperately to open her eyes, to let him know that she was still there, still fighting to come back to him. The love between them had become something powerful, something that even the medical trauma couldn't completely break. Sarah's unconscious mind held on to David's voice like an anchor, using it to navigate back through the darkness toward consciousness. As the seventh day approached, changes were happening in Sarah's brain that the monitors couldn't yet detect. Her love for David, combined with her own inner strength and the prayers of hundreds of Marines around the world, was slowly pulling her back toward the waking world. David, exhausted but determined, continued his constant vigil, unaware that his beloved Sarah was closer to returning to him than anyone realized. On the seventh morning, something extraordinary began to unfold at the Virginia hospital. Word had spread through military networks that today might be the day Sarah would wake up. Marines from the nearby base had quietly begun gathering in the hospital corridors, wanting to be present when the woman who had sacrificed everything for one of their brothers finally opened her eyes. David sat beside Sarah's bed as he had every day, holding her hand and talking softly to her. He noticed that her breathing seemed different today, more rhythmic and natural. The monitors showed that her brain activity had increased significantly during the night. "The doctors are very encouraged," Dr. Williams told David during his morning rounds. "All her vital signs are improving. Her body is healing remarkably well. If she's going to wake up, it could happen very soon." Marcus, now able to walk short distances with a cane, had joined David early that morning. Both men sensed that something special was about to happen. The atmosphere in the room felt charged with hope and possibility. At around 10 o'clock, Sarah's eyelids began to flutter. David immediately noticed the movement and called for Dr. Williams. As the doctor examined her, Sarah's eyes slowly opened, unfocused at first but gradually clearing. "Sarah," David whispered, tears streaming down his face, "can you hear me?" Sarah's eyes found his face, and despite her weakness, she managed the smallest of smiles. "David," she whispered so softly he had to lean close to hear her, "you made it to Marcus." "Yes, beautiful, thanks to you. You saved us both," David replied, his voice choked with emotion. "How do you feel?" "Tired," Sarah admitted, "but happy. Is Marcus okay?" Marcus leaned forward so she could see him. "I'm right here, Sarah. Thanks to you, I got to see my best friend when I needed him most. You're a hero." Dr. Williams checked Sarah's responses and was amazed by her rapid improvement once she regained consciousness. "This is remarkable," he told them. "Her recovery is progressing better than we dared hope." As news of Sarah's awakening spread through the hospital, something beautiful began to happen. Marines who had been quietly waiting in the corridors asked if they could briefly visit to pay their respects. Dr. Williams, understanding the special circumstances, agreed to allow short visits. The first Marine to enter was Corporal Johnson, a young man from David's unit. He stood at attention beside Sarah's bed and simply said, "Ma'am, thank you for taking care of our brother. You showed us what real courage looks like." One by one, more Marines came to visit. Each one stood respectfully, thanked Sarah for her sacrifice, and expressed their admiration for her dedication to David. Sarah was overwhelmed by their kindness and respect. As the day progressed, something unprecedented began to happen. Marines from other units at the base learned about Sarah's awakening and requested permission to visit. The hospital administrators, moved by the situation, worked with the military command to organize something special. Sergeant Major Rodriguez approached David in Sarah's room with a proposition. "We'd like to do something to honor Sarah," he explained. "Word has spread throughout the Marine Corps about what she did. We have Marines here who want to show their respect." By late afternoon, over 300 Marines had gathered at the hospital. They came from different units, different ranks, and different backgrounds, but they were united in their desire to honor the woman who had embodied the Marine values of loyalty, courage, and sacrifice. General Hayes arrived personally to coordinate what would become one of the most moving displays of military respect ever witnessed at a civilian hospital. The plan was simple but powerful. As Sarah was moved from the ICU to a regular room, she would be wheeled through a corridor lined with Marines, standing at attention in her honor. Sarah was initially hesitant about the attention. "I just did what anyone would do for someone they love," she told David. "No, Sarah," Marcus replied firmly. "What you did was extraordinary. You showed these Marines what it means to never leave a brother behind. You lived by their code without even knowing it." As evening approached, the hospital prepared for the unprecedented ceremony. Sarah, though still weak, insisted on sitting up in her wheelchair. She wore a simple hospital gown, but her dignity and grace made her radiant. David walked beside her wheelchair as the hospital staff began the procession down the main corridor. As they turned the corner, Sarah gasped at what she saw. 500 Marines lined both sides of the corridor, standing at perfect attention in their dress blue uniforms. The sight was breathtaking. Row after row of America's finest, all there to honor one woman's act of love and sacrifice. As Sarah's wheelchair slowly moved down the corridor, something magical happened. Without any command or signal, the Marines began to salute. The salute traveled like a wave down the entire length of the corridor, each Marine holding their salute until Sarah had passed. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she witnessed this incredible display of respect. She had never served in the military, had never worn a uniform, but these warriors were honoring her as one of their own. Halfway down the corridor, General Hayes stepped forward and addressed Sarah directly. "Ma'am, on behalf of the United States Marine Corps, I want to thank you for demonstrating the values we hold most dear. Your courage, loyalty, and selfless sacrifice embody the spirit of Semper Fidelis, always faithful. Today, you are an honorary Marine." The general then presented Sarah with an official Marine Corps Certificate of Appreciation, something rarely given to civilians. The assembled Marines erupted in applause, their disciplined formation momentarily breaking as they showed their genuine appreciation for this remarkable woman. As the procession continued, Sarah noticed something that touched her heart even more deeply. Among the Marines were some who were clearly recovering from their own injuries, some with prosthetic limbs, some with visible scars, some using canes or wheelchairs. These wounded warriors had come to honor her, despite their own challenges. Near the end of the corridor, David helped Sarah stand from her wheelchair. Though she was still weak, she wanted to address the Marines who had honored her so beautifully. "Thank you all," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent corridor. "I never imagined that helping the man I love would lead to this moment. You have shown me what true brotherhood means, and I am humbled by your respect." She paused, gathering her strength, then continued. "David told me about the bond between Marines, about how you never leave anyone behind. Today, I understand what that really means. It's not just about the battlefield, it's about life, about love, about being there for each other when it matters most." The Marines listened in complete silence, many of them visibly moved by her words. "I may not wear your uniform," Sarah concluded, "but I promise you this. I will always honor the trust you've shown me today. I will always remember that love and sacrifice can change the world, one person at a time." As Sarah finished speaking, something unprecedented happened. The 500 Marines, without any command, began to applaud. The sound echoed through the hospital corridors, a thunderous appreciation for a woman who had shown them that heroism comes in many forms. Later that evening, as the ceremony concluded and the Marines returned to their duties, Sarah sat in her new hospital room, surrounded by David, Marcus, her family, and close friends. The events of the day felt almost surreal, but the love and support she had witnessed were very real. David took her hand and looked into her eyes. "I have something to ask you," he said nervously. "After everything we've been through, after seeing how much love and support surrounds us, I can't wait any longer." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple but beautiful ring. "Sarah Martinez, you saved my life in every way possible. You showed me what real love looks like, and you gave everything you had to help me be there for my brother. Will you marry me?" Through happy tears, Sarah whispered, "Yes, David. Yes, with all my heart." As they embraced, Marcus couldn't help but smile. "Well, I guess I know what my first duty will be once I'm fully recovered. Best man at the most beautiful wedding the Marine Corps has ever seen." The room filled with laughter and joy as Sarah's family and friends celebrated the engagement. Outside in the corridor, a few Marines who had lingered to ensure everything was settled properly could hear the celebration and smiled, knowing that their brother had found his perfect match. 6 months later, Sarah and David were married in a beautiful ceremony at the Marine Corps Base Chapel. 500 Marines attended the wedding, the same warriors who had honored Sarah during her recovery. Marcus served as David's best man, fully recovered and proud to stand beside his friend. As Sarah walked down the aisle in her white dress, past rows of Marines standing at attention, she remembered that day in the hospital corridor when these same men had honored her sacrifice. Now they were witnesses to the love story that had begun with a wounded Marine and a caring nurse who gave everything to save him. The wedding was followed by a reception where Marines, doctors, nurses, and family members celebrated together. Speeches were made about courage, love, and the power of sacrifice. But the most moving moment came when General Hayes stood to address the newlyweds. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "today we celebrate more than a marriage. We celebrate the union of two people who showed us what it means to love without limits, to sacrifice without counting the cost, and to honor the bonds that tie us all together." She turned to address Sarah and David directly. "Your love story has become legend in the Marine Corps. It will be told for generations as an example of what happens when courage meets love, when sacrifice meets devotion." As the evening ended and Sarah and David prepared to leave for their honeymoon, hundreds of Marines formed an honor guard outside the reception hall. As the newlyweds walked through the tunnel of raised sabers, the same traditional Marine wedding exit, Sarah reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. What had begun as a nurse caring for a wounded Marine had become a love story that touched the hearts of warriors around the world. Sarah had given everything to save David, and in doing so, she had discovered that true love multiplies when it is shared, growing stronger, reaching further, and inspiring others to acts of courage and devotion they never thought possible. Years later, David and Sarah would establish a foundation to help military families in crisis, ensuring that other couples would have the support they needed during difficult times. Their story of sacrifice and love continued to inspire, proving that sometimes the greatest victories are won not on battlefields, but in the quiet moments when one person chooses to give everything for another. The 500 Marines who had saluted Sarah that day in the hospital would never forget the lesson she taught them, that heroism comes in many forms, and that the greatest battles are often fought with love as the only weapon. In honoring her, they had honored the best parts of themselves, and in her story, they found a reminder of why their service and sacrifice mattered. Sarah Martinez Thompson had indeed given everything to save the man she loved, and in return, she had received the respect and admiration of some of America's finest warriors. Her story became proof that love, when combined with courage and sacrifice, has the power to move mountains, heal hearts, and inspire entire communities to rise to their highest potential.